In July 1944, when German forces surrounded her Maquis camp in the Auvergne region of central France, Nancy Wake didn't panic. She got on a bicycle. For the next 72 hours, she pedaled over 200 kilometers through Nazi-occupied territory, passing countless German checkpoints, her life depending on nothing but charm, audacity, and a flirtatious smile. When guards stopped her, she would lean in close and purr, "Do you want to search me?" all while carrying secret messages that would have earned her immediate execution. She slept in haystacks and ditches, her body screaming in pain, but when she finally reached her destination and re-established radio contact with London, she simply dusted herself off and returned the same way she came. This wasn't unusual behavior for Nancy Wake. This was Tuesday. By that point in the war, the Gestapo had been hunting her for 2 years, nicknamed her the White Mouse for her uncanny ability to slip through every trap they set, and placed a 5 million franc bounty on her head, the highest price on any Allied agent in France. They had no idea they were chasing a woman who had started the war as a wealthy socialite in Marseille, sipping champagne at mid-morning and hosting glamorous parties with her French industrialist husband. They didn't know she had witnessed Nazi thugs beating Jewish people in the streets of Vienna in the 1930s and vowed to destroy them. They didn't know she had helped hundreds of Allied soldiers escape over the Pyrenees to Spain, jumping from moving trains and being shot at by German patrols. They didn't know that when they finally captured and tortured her husband to death trying to find her, she would return to France not to mourn, but to lead 7,000 resistance fighters in guerrilla warfare that killed over 1,400 Germans. And they certainly didn't know that this feminine woman, as her comrades described her, had killed a German SS officer with her bare hands, using a judo chop to the neck, executed a female German spy without hesitation, and once told reporters, "I hate people who are not direct. I am direct. I don't see why we women should just wave our men a proud goodbye and then knit them balaclavas." Nancy Wake would become the Allies' most decorated servicewoman of World War II, receiving honors from Britain, France, the United States, and Australia. But she would spend her final years drinking gin and tonics in a London veterans' home, regaling bar patrons with war stories that were so outrageous they sound like fiction, except every word was true. This is the story of the glamorous party girl who became a killing machine, the socialite who outsmarted the Gestapo at every turn, and the woman whose motto was simple. In my opinion, the only good German was a dead German, and the deader, the better. Nancy Grace Augusta Wake was born on August 30th, 1912, in Wellington, New Zealand, the youngest of 6 children in a family that was part Maori through her great-grandmother. When Nancy was just 20 months old, her family moved to North Sydney, Australia. Shortly after, her father abandoned the family and returned to New Zealand, leaving Nancy's mother to raise 6 children in poverty. Growing up in Sydney, Nancy was rebellious from the start. At 16, she ran away from home and worked as a nurse, moving around the country. When an aunt surprised her with £200, a substantial sum at the time, Nancy made a decision that would change her life. She was going to see the world. She traveled to New York, then to London, where she trained as a journalist. By the 1930s, Nancy was living the dream in Paris, working for the Hearst newspaper empire. She was beautiful, vivacious, and determined to experience everything life had to offer. Her assignments took her across Europe, and it was during these travels that she witnessed something that would haunt her forever. In Vienna, she saw Nazi gangs brutally harassing Jewish people in the streets, beating them, humiliating them, destroying their businesses while crowds watched or participated. "My hatred of the Nazis was very, very deep," she later said. These scenes convinced her that Nazism was not just a political movement, but an evil that had to be stopped. In 1937, Nancy met Henri Fiocca, a wealthy French industrialist. He was cultured, charming, and came from money, old money. They married on November 30th, 1939, just months after the war began. Nancy settled into a life of luxury in Marseille, with servants, champagne at breakfast, and parties that lasted until dawn. She had everything: wealth, love, freedom, and beauty. When France fell in June 1940, all of that ended. When German troops marched into France, Nancy Wake could have sat out the war in comfort. Her husband's wealth and connections offered protection. She was living in Vichy France, which collaborated with the Nazis, affording those with money relative safety. But Nancy wasn't built that way. Almost immediately, she joined the French resistance. She began working as a courier and an ambulance driver, seemingly innocuous roles for a wealthy woman. But Nancy was using her status, her beauty, and her charm as weapons. She could pass through German checkpoints with a smile and a wink that made guards forget to search her vehicle, a vehicle often carrying secret messages, weapons, or Allied soldiers. She became involved with the Pat O'Leary line, a network dedicated to smuggling Allied airmen who had been shot down over France to safety in neutral Spain. The work was extraordinarily dangerous. If caught, the penalty was torture and execution. Nancy didn't care. She purchased an ambulance with her own money and used it to transport escapees. She charmed, bribed, and flirted her way past Nazi checkpoints, always staying one step ahead. Her wealth helped enormously. German officers saw a glamorous socialite, not a resistance operative. She described her tactics: "A little powder and a little drink on the way, and I'd pass their posts and wink and say, 'Do you want to search me?' God, what a flirtatious little bastard I was." For 3 years, from 1940 to 1943, Nancy Wake helped hundreds of Allied soldiers escape. She led them over the treacherous Pyrenees mountains to Spain, often under fire, often with little food or water. She slept in sheep pens and haystacks. She jumped from moving trains to evade capture. She was arrested twice and talked her way out both times. But the Gestapo was closing in. They knew someone was operating an escape network in Marseille. They tapped her phone. They intercepted her mail. They placed her under surveillance. In 1943, they nicknamed her the White Mouse for her ability to evade every trap they set. They placed a bounty of 5 million francs on her head, the highest price on any Allied agent in France. In November 1942, after Operation Torch began in North Africa, German forces occupied all of Vichy France, giving the Gestapo unrestricted access. Nancy's life became impossible. The net was closing. She had to run. Her husband Henri begged her to leave. "They're going to get you," he told her. "You have to go." Nancy didn't want to leave him, but she knew he was right. She kissed him goodbye, not knowing it would be the last time she would ever see him. Getting out of France proved to be a nightmare. It took 6 attempts. She was captured by French militia in Toulouse and interrogated for 4 days. They beat her, trying to make her talk. She claimed she was simply a woman trying to reach her family in Spain. Finally, Albert Guéris, the head of the O'Leary line, managed to secure her release by claiming she was his mistress, trying to conceal her affair, all of which was untrue, but the story worked. On her final escape attempt, Nancy was on a train when German soldiers began searching passengers. Rather than be captured, she threw herself from the moving train. German soldiers fired at her as she ran. She escaped into the countryside, eventually making her way over the Pyrenees on foot. She arrived in Spain exhausted, starving, and traumatized. From there she made her way to Gibraltar and finally to England in June 1943. She was safe, but she didn't feel relief. She felt fury. She wanted revenge. What Nancy didn't know, what she wouldn't discover until after the war ended, was that the Gestapo had captured Henri. They tortured him brutally, demanding to know where his wife was. Henri never talked. The Gestapo executed him. For the rest of her life, Nancy blamed herself for his death. "It was because of me he died," she said. The guilt never left her. In England, Nancy Wake was determined to return to France, not as a courier, but as a trained killer. She approached the Special Operations Executive, SOE, the secret British organization tasked with conducting espionage, sabotage, and reconnaissance in occupied Europe. The SOE was skeptical at first. Nancy was 31, a woman, and had no military training. But her record spoke for itself. She had spent 3 years operating under the Gestapo's noses. She had nerves of steel. The SOE accepted her. What followed were 8 months of the most brutal training imaginable. Nancy learned silent killing techniques, hand-to-hand combat, sabotage, demolitions, weapons handling, Sten guns, rifles, pistols, grenades, parachute jumping, codes, and radio operation. She learned how to survive behind enemy lines, how to withstand interrogation, how to kill without hesitation. Her training reports paint a fascinating picture. She struggled with some technical subjects, like map reading and report writing. She found them tedious and boring. But in leadership and tactics, she excelled. One report noted, "has the power of leading men." Another, "proved to be an efficient leader on one scheme." In boat work, this student showed great keenness and made excellent progress. The SOE instructors recognized that Nancy Wake wasn't going to be a traditional agent. She was bold, direct, fearless to the point of recklessness. She didn't follow rules she disagreed with, but she was also exactly the kind of person they needed. Someone who could inspire resistance fighters, who could lead men into battle, who wouldn't crack under pressure. Her code name would be Hélène. On the night of April 29-30, 1944, Nancy Wake parachuted into occupied France as part of a team codenamed Freelance. She landed in a tree in the Allier department. Henri Taudivat, the local Maquis leader, found her tangled in the branches and made a flirtatious comment about hoping all SOE agents were as beautiful as her. Nancy shot back, "Cut out the French shit and get me down." She was back in France, and she was ready for war. Nancy's mission was to organize, arm, and lead the Maquis, the rural guerrilla resistance fighters, in preparation for D-Day. The Maquis were brave, but poorly equipped, poorly trained, and poorly organized. Nancy's job was to change that. She became the administrative head of approximately 7,000 resistance fighters spread across the Auvergne region. Her responsibilities included coordinating parachute drops of weapons and supplies from the Allies, distributing those weapons, training fighters, planning attacks on German installations, and maintaining communication with London via radio. The work was exhausting and deadly dangerous. Parachute drops happened at night, requiring Nancy to organize reception committees, identify drop zones, and distribute weapons before German patrols could respond. She often worked 20-hour days. She slept in the open or in abandoned barns. She ate whatever food was available, often very little. Her leadership style was unique. She was tough, profane, and fearless. She drank with her men, cursed like a soldier, and led from the front. The French resistance fighters, many of whom had never taken orders from a woman, quickly came to respect and even revere her. Tardivat later said, "She is the most feminine woman I know, until the fighting starts. Then she is like 5 men." Nancy organized and led attacks on German convoys, ambushed patrols, and sabotaged infrastructure. When her camp was attacked by German forces in one battle, 7 French Maquis were killed, but Nancy's fighters killed and wounded many more Germans and successfully repelled the attack. One of the most controversial moments of her wartime service involved a female German spy who had infiltrated the Maquis. Nancy's men captured the woman, but hesitated to execute her. Nancy didn't hesitate. She gave the order for the firing squad herself. "She would have had no compunction in getting my men and myself shot," Nancy later explained. "Besides, in my opinion, the only good German was a dead German, and the deader the better." In June 1944, a major German force, reportedly 22,000 troops, launched a counterattack against the Maquis in the Auvergne. Nancy's fighters were outnumbered and outgunned, but they fought brilliantly. Using guerrilla tactics, ambushes, and superior knowledge of the terrain, they inflicted devastating casualties on the Germans. When the battle ended, the Germans had suffered approximately 1,400 killed. Nancy's forces had lost about 100 men. It was a stunning victory and a testament to the training and leadership Nancy had provided. The Germans withdrew, and the Maquis controlled the region until Allied forces arrived to liberate France. After the liberation, Nancy tried to find out what had happened to Henri. The truth devastated her. He had been captured, tortured, and executed by the Gestapo. Nancy blamed herself for the rest of her life. "It was because of me that he died," she told reporters decades later. "I got him killed." When the war ended, Nancy Wake was 33 years old. She had lost her husband, her home, her pre-war life. She tried to find her place in the post-war world, but peace didn't suit her. She briefly worked in intelligence. In 1957, she married John Forward, a former RAF pilot, and they settled in Australia. She ran for political office several times, but never won an election. "I wasn't cut out for politics," she later admitted. "I said what I thought, and apparently that's not how you win elections." Nancy struggled with survivor's guilt and PTSD, though it wasn't called that at the time. She drank heavily. Gin was her drink of choice and could be difficult. She never had children. Her marriage to John Forward lasted until his death in 1997. In her later years, Nancy sold her medals to raise money and returned to London, where she lived in a nursing home for retired veterans. She spent much of her time at a nearby hotel bar, drinking gin and tonics and telling war stories to anyone who would listen. In 1985, she published her autobiography, The White Mouse. The book told her story in her own words, blunt, profane, and unapologetic. A 1987 TV movie was made about her, but Nancy hated it. "For goodness sake, did the Allies parachute me into France to fry eggs and bacon for the men? There wasn't an egg to had for love nor money, and even if there had been, why would I be frying it when I had men to do that sort of thing?" Even in old age, Nancy Wake remained defiant, sharp-tongued, and completely herself. Nancy Wake died on August 7, 2011, at Kingston Hospital in London. She was 98 years old. Before her death, she had made one final request. "When I die, I want my ashes scattered over the hills where I fought with brave men." Her wish was honored. Her ashes were scattered in the woods surrounding the Château de Fragnes, near Montluçon, which had served as her headquarters with the Marquis in 1944, the area where she fought, led, and became a legend. Nancy Wake's story challenges every stereotype about women in war. She wasn't a nurse tending to the wounded or a secretary typing reports. She was a combat leader who killed enemy soldiers, executed spies, led men into battle, and outsmarted the Gestapo for years. Her gender made her more effective, not less. German soldiers didn't expect a beautiful woman to be carrying weapons or secret messages. Guards let her pass when they would have stopped a man. Her femininity was a weapon she wielded with devastating effectiveness. But Nancy never wanted to be celebrated as a female hero. She wanted to be remembered as a hero, period. Quote, "I don't see why we women should just wave our men a proud goodbye," she said. "Women can do more than knit balaclavas." Unquote. The Gestapo called her the White Mouse because they could never catch her. Her comrades called her the bravest person they'd ever known. History remembers her as one of the most effective and deadly Allied agents of World War II. Nancy Wake proved that courage has no gender, that determination can overcome any obstacle, and that sometimes the most dangerous weapon isn't a gun. It's a woman who refuses to be underestimated. As she once said, quote, "I killed a lot of Germans, and I am only sorry I didn't kill more." Unquote.